This lesson, we're going to be setting up our public folder. So let's open that up, and we can just simply create a folder there, or we can do it within the command line. So to make the directory, so make public, we can also create an index page by doing echo. So this is what we did before earlier, one of the earlier lessons, echo, and then the content that we want to output. So for now, we'll just do hello, and then we'll open that up. And this time, because it's in public, make sure that we get the right directory and index.html. So this is just front end page. So there we go. So we've got our index page. It's all sitting there ready to go. Let's start up NodeMon again. And when we refresh, we have the route set. So we're not actually going to the index page. We're going to wherever this route is set. So we've got the route going to get sent, and that's what it's returning. So we want to do something before we actually get to the routes. And that's going to be within the middleware, where we're going to check to see if going over to open up a static page, and Express has a static module for that. So let's use, first of all, let's log out our current directory. So if we ever want to get the current directory that actually we're sitting in from the computer's point of view, so that's going to be directory name. And you can see that's the directory where all our files are located on this system. And we need to use that in order to identify where our files are going to be sitting, or where our folders are going to be sitting from the root. So let's use app use, because we're not always starting from index.js. So these ones, all of these routes and all of these paths, if we're just doing the // then we're taking it from wherever the starting file is. So we might not always have starting point of index.js. And in case we don't, it's always good to state where we're located, where the files are actually located on the system. So we're using Express static. And let's do that directory that we just looked at. So directory name. So that's going to be where we're going to be listing out the path plus / public, because it's right within that root. So this is where we want our starting point of our application to start out. So refresh, and there we go. So now we're on this file over here. Let's remember again that the middleware is actually running before we hit our routes. And that's why this one over here, technically you shouldn't have both of them. So this one's actually not going to get sent out. We're going over to that main static page, because that's actually coming before that. So even if we go over here, we get the output of that index page. So we don't get this route anymore. So let's also update our routes, and we're going to be creating a listing of a bunch of users. And we're going to use a data file in order to output a bunch of users. So now this one will go, the route will be app get users. We'll have another one where we can post to users, and we can get rid of all of this content here. And if we want to get just one user, we're going to pass in a parameter, and it's going to be :ID, because we want to get the user by their ID. So this is going to get one single user. The users, if we just go to the default route, then we're going to pull back all of the users. And next, let's look at put. So put will have the same path. So we go app users ID, and we're going to pass the parameter of ID. So it's going to be expecting that. And then comma separated out request response. I'll just do a send there as a placeholder. And also let's update put as well. So put and delete are actually going to have the same values as we do for the get, because this is going to be dealing with just that single individual user, where we're updating them, we're getting their information, and then over here is where we're deleting that particular user. And the reason post is different is because this is where we're going to actually create a user. So within here, this is where we create and add user. And let's see, all use get user info by ID. Over here, we're going to update users. And here, we're going to delete a user. It should actually just be one user. Oh, and it looks like I did forget one of these. So rounded bracket, just make sure that that's right. So we saw that there was an app crashed here. So we know that there was something wrong within the code. So everything else looks right, and we're ready to move on to the next step where we're going to continue building out the front end. So we're going to work on the index page and build that out to an actual web page where we can make jQuery requests to our backend routes, because now that we've set up all of the routes, so we don't always have to keep using Postman, and we can actually use jQuery and our front end code and return back some responses. So that's coming up in the upcoming lessons. Let's do, we can do also a quick test to see if we've got users. So users is working. And one more thing before we conclude this lesson. So we saw that we've got put and we've got ID, and there is a way to actually pick up that ID. So right now when I make the put to this route, I just see put sent. So let's grab our parameters. And just as we saw this earlier, we can do the request params. And we're going to log that out in the console first. So we can see that within the console, we're logging out ID 500 or whatever the ID is. We see that it gets logged out there. And we can also make use of that over here. We can do something like put sent plus ID. And that would be if we always have an ID. So we see that we can pass that in as well, and we can make use of that. And that's also really important, especially when we're trying to update particular record in a database or within our data, that we need to have that ID in order to access it properly. So we can do it within this type of format where we've got an ID in our database, and then we can update that particular record that matches that ID that we've sent through. And we can also do the same thing we can get the same parameters when we go to get, because we have them on all of them here and also on the delete as well. So we can actually see which value we're trying to send that request to. So even if I go to get, we can see same thing gets passed in. So next lesson is going to be really interesting because we're going to be jumping into our front end and we're going to be connecting it to our back end. So that's coming up.